All right, guys, we're ready to look at Q2, which has been released from the College Board as a practice sample. Again, remember, College Board has specifically put online that they're trying in some ways to kind of make us think about the questions and not really give us too much information about exam day. So I'm not completely sure if this format is exactly what you're going to see, but I do see the skills here that we've been working on all year. So I still feel pretty confident. We're just going to have to focus on answering all parts of the question rather than figuring out where the points are and that kind of thing. I will still map this out for you the way that we always have done, but I kind of see some problems with this question, and I'm not sure that it would ever actually get vetted and out there to the world. I think this was put together very quickly. I just don't know. I mean, I've tried to guess College Board in lots of different ways, but I can get it wrong. So I'm hoping that this will be a little bit more specific. It seems like a generic form of continuity and change. So, I mean, you can literally stick any work in there you want, right? I mean, there's nothing specific from the words here about Vermeer and that work. So I kind of think this may not necessarily be exactly what we're going to see on exam day. So we'll play along, we'll annotate, we'll even practice writing a couple that are like this just in case, but not completely sure how this will go. Okay, so I have some misgivings about this thing. A couple of things here. You guys know that this is Johannes Vermeer from the Dutch Golden Age. His little bitty piece called Woman Weighing Pearls. We've looked at it before in terms of Baroque art, and it matches the tradition of Jean Racine. Now, I got to tell you, Jean Racine was not exactly what I went to first. I kind of thought that you needed to go a little bit earlier than Jean Racine because it's kind of part of that same movement, right? So I went with the Renaissance, and I'm going to explain what I did with both of those for you so that you can kind of see two different ways that you could deal with this. All right, first things first, we're going to annotate, marking the text. Basically, we're going to start with our verbs, okay? So I see familiar, explain, explain, explain. Okay, so I'm happy to see those verbs there. I see explain how. Let me get my glasses so I can see a little bit better. I now see another how and a why. How usually has to do with like subject matter and content, or maybe even function. Why is usually contextual. So I'm going to put that on the side burner for just a second and then take a look at what we're actually being asked to do. I've got some more connector words probably somewhere. Let's just make sure. And, or, from, to. Okay, I'm not seeing any other connector words. All right, so we can move on. Using two examples of specific visual evidence. All right, I know that's going to be my VE, either subject matter or form, right? So that's how I earn that point. And I guess I should highlight two, right? Because I might have to do that twice. All right, so I know that this is VE as well. I'm going to also have to do two. And I'm going to have to do two down here with contextual. So this lines up beautifully for like, whoops, you see what I did there? That's supposed to be contextual. This lines up so that you can see the parts and structure of the question, but now I need to see those phrases about what they really want us to do, how this work demonstrates continuity, right? There's my first part. How this work demonstrates change from earlier artistic tradition. Okay, all right. Now, this is why the work deviates from the earlier tradition. So, gosh, I think that's pretty much lickety split. I got everything I need to know to talk about. Now, I'm going to label points. This is where it gets a little confusing. You might have some art history teachers who say continuity is easier to demonstrate than, say, change, or that context is always a lot harder than either of those two. I don't know. So we could be looking at like another 2-point question, 2-point question, 3-point question, depending on how it breaks down. I just want to make sure I get all parts of the question. So I want to say demonstrates continuity here. I'm going to kind of use a shape we've seen before, right? The pyramid. If I'm talking about continuity, right? I now have to show how this work shows continuity. I have to show it twice. I have to do that with VE. So I think all of these ideas are related. Okay, so now whether or not, they give me 2 points or 3 points. I don't think we need to worry about that, really. Let's just make sure we're answering all the parts of the question. I'm going to double check. Explain how this work demonstrates continuity with established art traditions. I got to figure out which one I'm going to pick, right? And then use visual evidence for that. So I'm going to say, genre scene. Is that what we're going with here? Is that like the tradition that we're looking at? Or is it something further back, maybe the Renaissance? Okay. I haven't quite figured that out yet, so let me look some more here. Demonstrates change from earlier artistic traditions. Explain how. So now we've got the second tier, and this is all about change for me. So this work does a little of the old stuff. This we'll talk about how it does some of the new stuff, how it does. Basically 2 examples there. So I know I got to do one on one side. This is still VE again. I should be able to see what I'm talking about. The reader should be able to. I'm still not sure. Genre scene or Renaissance, right? And you might have to play around with this in your mind and figure out which one you could write a better answer for, right? Okay. Using 2 examples of specific contextual evidence, explain why this work deviates from established artistic traditions. Okay. This is, I think, what's going to decide it for most of us. It depends on how comfortable you are with those 2 artistic traditions, because you got to say how this one is incredibly different and why. And this is where the continuity, the change gets a little bit of context. Okay, change. Got to do it 2 times. Yep, 2 times. And I'm going to have to do it this time with contextual evidence. Okay. I got to tell you, I saw a lot of similarities here with concerns of the Renaissance. I see things that look like they are foreshortened, vanished, basically. If you look at the line at the edge of the table, it's pointing to her hand. If you look at the line of the painting in the background, it's pointing there. I know that this is the vanishing point because all of the lines lead me to that right there, what's going on the table. And that's a very Renaissance-y thing kind of to do. So I could argue that that is one example that kind of demonstrates continuity with the Renaissance, right? I could also say the qualities of light make her look 3-dimensional. I've got a little shading on her arm. I've got shading on her face. I see the light is hitting her in the face here. And it makes me think that's more of like a sphere rather than a flat figure. And that's chiaroscuro that you're seeing, the nice little shading going on there. It's all over the drapery as well as the table itself and her clothing. So we can see natural shadows. I could even say naturalism seems to be like something that we're going for here. And that was very much a big part of the Renaissance, trying to create a window on the world that looks like reality to most people. So, there's a lot here that ties it to the Renaissance. When I thought genre scene, guys, I had to go back to the image set and say, well, where have we seen one, right? I think this is the first day that I talked to you in earnest about genre scenes specifically, but we have seen Hunters in the Snow, right? So that we can use that idea for like contrasting this a little bit. If it helps you think about what you've seen in the image set, that's from the mid 16th century. This is from the mid 17th century. So you could say this is definitely a tradition, but that's done a wholly different way. A lot of people say that Las Meninas is a genre scene, and an unusual one because it's also doubles as state portraiture. I can kind of get into that kind of discussion, but it's very close to this time period. I don't know how much it's going to tell us about a different situation for genre scene. As a matter of fact, a lot of people say Vermeer copies Velázquez in his diffuse use of light. So it's kind of challenging. Why don't we stick with this one as our example in the image set of a genre scene? I want you to think of how many figures are in Hunters of the Snow. There's these guys that are coming back from a hunt. People are, getting a pig ready to eat. There are people way off down the hill. There's tons and tons of figures, right? there's only one figure here, and it seems to be a more quiet moment than what we saw in that composition. And that's pretty typical of Dutch genre scenes. Dutch genre scenes of this time period typically had multiple people packed into a house, and they were trying to demonstrate morals of, good behavior or bad behavior and their outcomes, kind of like Hogarth when he does the breakfast scene, Marriage a la Mode. Stuff is going everywhere. It's crazy. It seems loud. This is quiet, thoughtful, simplified. I mean, basically, you have a wholly different mood here than what I'm seeing in genre scenes like that. So I kind of see now where you might go. For continuity with a genre scene, we could say it's an interior scene. Nothing, epic is going on. It's a scene from everyday life as she weighs pearls for purchase in the store. Someone's going to buy these. She seems kind of lost in a moment of waiting for the balance to kind of come to rest, but that gives us an opportunity to notice her environment a little bit more. It's something that would appeal to like the merchant class, right? These are the people that are buying them at the time. So it's perfect for genre scene, but it also demonstrates Vermeer's peculiar twist on that. So it has continuity with those two traditions, and I think you can probably figure out from there. Renaissance, we could say diagonals that vanish to the middle of the painting. We could say that things up front are in more detail than things in the back for aerial perspectives to some degree. We could say chiaroscuro for the shading. We could say that things look naturalistic. Remember, again, this is not in color. If we could see the color palette, you would see that these are everyday colors like you would see in Raphael. So lots of connections to the Renaissance, I think. That's the check that I made there. For genre scene, mundane activity, everyday task, nothing heroic going on. Just a moment that's been caught in a Dutch interior that seems to be contemporary with what's going on at the time. So how is this different than the genre scene? And I mean, how is this different than genre scene and the Renaissance? Well, this is kind of interesting. The use of light, I think, is what distinguishes Vermeer from those people in the Renaissance. He had access to things like camera obscuras, and he basically could stage this thing, look at the color harmonies and the composition, and change things as he proceeded very slowly through his finished piece. The Renaissance masters did not have that opportunity to use those microscopes and lenses and camera obscuras. So that's one way that we can differentiate between the two. He has a high degree of finished detail, and he's also able to capitalize on optics. If you guys take a look at the fur-lined coat or the framed head covering around her head, those are supposed to be white, but they reflect colors of natural light coming in from the side, as well as textures that are reflected onto them. For Vermeer, white was never just a solid color. It was like a composite of everything around it. So that's a different approach to this that basically is possible because of his knowledge of optics. He's the guy that knows about after image, right? Where you stare at an image and it changes. Those are kind of fun to do in class, but the idea is that he was aware of how to paint so that our eye would resolve that altogether. So that demonstrates a change from the Renaissance in thinking about color in that way. You could say it's different from typical genre scenes in that we're looking at one figure instead of like 300. And we're looking at a quieter moment that's not so boisterous with people running everywhere. She seems lost in thought, and we're kind of lost and drawn into what's going on. The moralizing content on the back here, the Last Judgment, I think that's probably more continuity with genre scene because there's always a moral lesson that they're trying to teach. And that's where the vanitas comes in. If you get distracted by pearls and diadems and gems, you might not be aware that we're getting closer and closer to the end of time. And it creates kind of, a warning. There's Christ. People are being raised up to be judged. Other people are being cast into hell. And she stands literally right in the middle of that as kind of a metaphor for Protestant concerns of the day. So the format seems to divide itself among those kinds of concerns and the concerns of the everyday. So I think it both adopts the approach for genre scene, but it also pushes back a little bit. I hope those things are helpful. I'm going to show you something here in a second that I think will be more specific, and you can freeze frame the video so that you can get the information if it's helpful. But let's go on to contextual evidence. And this is where it gets tricky. Which one of these are you more like familiar with, right? And this is the point where you have to do some hard question asking. I think I would do a better job with the Renaissance myself. I mean, I know genre scenes in Vanitas paintings because I've seen a little bit more than what's in the image set, but I don't know if you guys feel comfortable writing an essay all about genre scenes. So I don't know. I think with this one, I might have gone with the Renaissance, right? Um, the reason why this deviates, this is a Protestant nation that is newly independent. It's a republic. It doesn't have a king. It doesn't have a monarch. It doesn't have a church. At least a church that adopts like heavy decoration as something that's part of its to-do list, right? The Protestants are simple. They still want to show off their excesses because they're becoming wealthy as merchants, but they need to do it the right way. If there's a moralizing save in the picture that's incorporated, then it can be argued that this is teaching a lesson and not about the riches of life that the merchant class are beginning to experience for the first time, right? So that's why it's basically happening. We're looking at a mundane moment that people identify with as a luxurious kind of temptation with furs and textures and shine and glitter. But then we realize that there's this little reminder in the background that we need to get busy. The end of time is coming. So it works as a vanitas for that reason. The wealthy are trying to cover their households with this work. Now, that means that they probably, unless they have a palace, don't have room to exhibit this kind of stuff. You remember how big these suckers were? This was something you could get lost in. It was like maybe 6 feet by 8 feet. Las Meninas is even bigger than that. So this work, pretty small, about 3 feet by 5 feet, and it was meant to go into a home, not a palace, not a fort or whatever. Basically, this was someone's domestic home, and they wanted this image there. So there are lots of reasons why we could say this happens at that time as opposed to this happening in the Renaissance. But I hope that helps you a little bit with this question. I was a little surprised by its formatting, but this might be College Board throwing us a curveball here, but we can still figure it out. As long as you're doing all parts of the question, the points are going to fall by themselves. Some people have said they think it's going to be 2 points, 2 points, 3 points. I don't think so because this is a 15-minute question, okay? Just make sure you're answering all parts of the questions, and we'll sort out the points and where they fall a little bit later. Let me show you how my friend figured it out, and we'll see if we agree. All right, so guys, I wanted to show you here basically what my friend came up with that I thought was really helpful in trying to sort out this new continuity and change kind of format. Here's the question. Here's the artwork again. I got to tell you, I just read Stockstead while I was waiting for the other video to load, and I kind of see where this question came from. Stockstead basically does identify genre scene as like an established tradition, and Vermeer is iconically departing from that tradition of a noisy interior and a robust household, basically to make a moment of quiet, subdued meditation. So frenetic emotion is dispensed with, and we just catch a quiet moment, which is unusual in that tradition. So just got to be reading everything, don't we? Here is the 2 examples of specific visual evidence, explain how this work demonstrates continuity with established artistic traditions. I think that she also went with genre painting, but there's some things in here that make me think more about the Renaissance. So I think we could have gone either way with this one pretty easily. Here you can see 2 examples of specific visual evidence, explain how the work demonstrates change. Fewer people means a small, intimate painting. Remember, the size is much smaller. Secular subject matter, seemingly at the moment, until you see what's behind her head. Soft, warm lighting. I love that one because this is the diffuse lighting that we know Vermeer for. It's not like shining an opera light on what's happening in the minute, like a dramatic sense. It's very quiet. It's very soft. The middle class subject depicted. I mean, these are any of these that you're familiar with or comfortable with, you could use. And she doesn't specify where the points go, unless she's just assuming that we get 2 points for each part of the question. I don't know. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But Don't worry. If you've answered every part of the question, then the points will follow you. Don't let yourself follow the points, okay? Using two examples of specific visual evidence, explain how this work demonstrates change. Contextually, now we're getting to the history part of the scenario. New merchant class, Protestant audiences, 17th century Netherlands, basically secular paintings, things that are not religious. All of those, I think, would do well for you on this question. So that kind of confirms what we know from what we read together. So I hope you're seeing that we are doing our homework. We're trying to tie these skills together and put them in before you in a way that you can use them later. So if you're doing your homework and if you're warming up, you're going to have the skills you need come Friday when we write this thing. Okay. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm going to be continuously making videos and posting, so I'll let you know when I do. Have a good one.